Welcome to another reading of Mehera-Meher. We're starting on page 299, I mean
293.
293, pardon me, and we have Bing beginning the reading. Thank you.
On April, on 21 April, Ali Shah was brought to Hyderabad for 10 days. Baba worked with him in semi-seclusion, and it was during this time that Allies continued their victorious push through Germany. On 1 May, Ali Shah was sent back to Ahmednagar, and Baba began a 10-day fast of water mixed with gluten D glucose powder, though he continued to look for mosques in the city. As instructed previously in the March circular, the signatories to Baba's orders also fasted that day. Baba was saying very little to the women about the war these days, but when they heard on the radio that Hitler and his mistress had committed suicide rather than surrender, Baba did remark, if Hitler had been caught and punished, his sanskaras would have been washed away. It was wrong of him to commit suicide, a very wrong thing to do. Hitler should have faced all and suffered the consequences. Finish it off in this life. Now he will have to face it in the next life. Even if they had shot him, it wouldn't have mattered. It would have equalized the sanskaras. It is not the body that matters, but the soul. It would have been beneficial for his soul. Suicide is the worst possible thing a soul can do. However much difficulty one is facing, one should pass through it. The German army surrendered unconditionally on 7 May, and the following day was celebrated as Victory in Europe Day. In France, this also happened to be the National Day of Joan of Arc. 2 days later, Baba broke his glucose water fast. There's a picture of Blue Bus Tours, place and date unknown, Monty MSI collection. And a side note, some Nazi war criminals who did not commit suicide or escape to other countries were prosecuted during the Nuremberg trials and later executed. The trials established new principles in the law of nations. Above all, that every person is responsible for his or her own acts. Next page is a picture of Rano and Margaret in Nasik in April 1937. Elizabeth took the photo. Blue geranium, 73. Taking only Adi Sr. from the Mandalay, Baba left Hyderabad on 22 May 1945 for the meeting in Meherabad that had been called for 40 of the signatories. At the meeting, it was decided that the month-long gathering for all the signatories would take place in December in Raipur, and a circular was issued later to that effect. Baba stated, you might think that the war in Europe is over, but war has now seriously begun. This war has been created by illusion and is now entering its final phase. 2 stages are over, and the last stage has commenced. The climax is not far off. Immense suffering awaits the world. Natural and unnatural destruction will take place. Lord Meher, page 3026. He indicated that Russia still had a role to play in the war, and that for reasons connected with his work, he would have no contact with the Mandalay up to the end of December. On hearing that, people wanted his darshan and literature, Baba said. After December, I will need no medium for my work. When I unsheath my divine sword, I will need no help from the Mandalay. I will no longer need meetings and literature. All these will adjust themselves. Baba commented, the time has come to break the bindings of Shariat. religion. And when I unsheath my sword, these bindings will break. The headquarters of Shariat is Hyderabad, and as you know, I am staying there at present. After complimenting the Mandalay individually on their long years of service and work, he said that despite the blank wall they faced for their future and nothing but abject disappointment in worldly affairs, yet they still hold on to the bargain and promise made by me since the beginning, for some great spiritual benefit of which they at the moment have not the slightest glimpse. About current events, Baba stated, the world situation has become extremely complicated. After the defeat of Germany, the Russian problem has become very significant. The question of Japan's defeat remains to be tackled. The climax of the war will come in December, and then the real game will start. All nations will feel helpless, and either a third world war will be the result, or someone like one of us masters will come forward to help them. At that time, I will say my namaz, prayer. That namaz will be the drawing out of the divine sword. Ibid, pages 3026 to 38. Posim. Baba returned to Hyderabad with Adi Sr., where from 4 June, Baba sought out Mass for 3 days. In the meantime, Margaret had contracted dysentery. Dr. Duncan was asked to treat her, but since he had army duties, he was not able to come every day. So Baba said that Rano must give Margaret the prescribed injections. Rana was horrified, but Don showed her how to do it, and Baba told her to give the injection. Baba was watching, but Rano hesitated. Give the shot, or I'll send you back to Meherabad, he ordered. Don't threaten me, Baba, Rana replied. I'll do it. Later, she recalled, I gave Margaret the shot, but afterwards my hands were like jelly, and Baba asked if I was all right. Once or twice, Rana was sent to Secunderabad to see Don for Baba's work, but Baba would not let her go alone in the carriage and made Badul accompany her. Ranu thought this ironic since Baba had already sent her alone on the train all the way from Meherabad to Raipur. Ranu and Margaret shared certain duties in Hyderabad, such as opening the door if anyone came to the house. Once Margaret took a nap during her turn, the doorbell rang, and Ranu was steamed that she had to open the door when Margaret should have been on duty. They began quarreling. Baba looked at Rano and said, if you two don't stop bickering, I'm sending you, Rano, straight back to Meherabad. Things were better for a while, but then something else happened. With tears in her eyes, Rano approached Baba and said, it's no good, Baba. Send me back to Meherabad. Margaret and I can't get along. Baba just laughed, and after that, things seemed to settle down. Later, Margaret stayed with Baba and the women Mandalay more often than Ranu. Looking back, Ranu surmised that it was because Margaret was soon to be sent back to the West, while Ranu stayed in India for the rest of her life. Margaret was taken to stay at Marazat first with Baba and the girls. Ranu explained, giving Margaret more of a chance to be with him, knowing she would soon leave. Baba was allowing Margaret to be with him more during the latter part of her stay in India, more than myself and Kitty. Baba put Kitty and me together more. We were never jealous of Margaret because of this. We thought her fortunate to be called to be with Baba. In Hyderabad, Rano and Margaret's bedroom was on the way to the pool, and the women walked through it every day and saw things strewn over Margaret's bed. Margaret's side of the room was always untidy. One more reason for Rana, who was scrupulously neat, to become miffed. Margaret's packing consisted of throwing everything together and squashing it up in her bedding roll. After a few stops, her stiff solar toupee became a floppy pulp. One day, when Margaret was making a pattern for a dress, she cut it out on her bed with tiny nail scissors and made a royal mess of the room. She would make a mistake, crumple up the paper, and start again until the floor was littered with paper balls. Baba came along and asked, "What are you doing?" She explained, and he said, "I have to walk through here, so be sure to pick up everything." He added, "Why are you going to, when are you going to start sewing? So far, you're only making the pattern. It's the strangest sewing I've ever seen." During the Blue Bus tour and afterwards, Irene often shared a room with Margaret and recalled Margaret's bed, wherever we went, was always full of things, her books, her comb, her clothes, or whatever, all strewn on the floor or on her mattress. I don't know how she could lie down on it. It drove Rano crazy. About the rivalry between Margaret and Rano, Mani commented, "Each of us never thought like alike or like the same things. Margaret was by nature happy-go-lucky. She didn't mind if a thing was crooked, if one shoe was on the bed and the other under it, or if the broom was on the table. Margaret was more concerned about the essentials. The way of life of Rano, the artist, was that everything had to be in its place. Everything had to be precise. For example, no matter how tired Katie came from her work in the kitchen, after she washed her face in the bathroom, the face towel had to be left absolutely right. If it were 1 centimeter off, Rana would notice. Somebody kept it crooked just to tease her. Rana was finicky about keeping things neat. Margaret was just the opposite. As a side note, Margaret once said, "My actual nature is rather on the lazy side." Margaret said the same thing about herself, which is perhaps another reason why she and Mara got along so well.
So that was Mara once said.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Did I misspeak? Anyway, that's correct. Katie, too, was particular about the way things should be done, and she and Rana were especially bothered by the haphazard way of Margaret, the way Margaret slung her clothes on the line in her corner of the room instead of neatly hanging up everything. Baba loved practical jokes, Mani continued. One day in Hyderabad, when Margaret was out of the room, Baba put his finger to his lips and said, "Shh, let's go." We all tiptoed into Margaret's room. Baba disorganized everything and added a few things to the accumulated junk. We put the things from her bed on the table and the broom on her bed. Baba even put a little pebble in her dance shoe, something that would make her notice and realize that something was different. Then we all came away as Margaret was coming. We waited and waited, peeking around the corner, but not a peep out of Margaret. She didn't notice, and if she didn't notice, it didn't make any difference. In the end, it was so funny. Baba and we went back, and Baba was practically asking, "What's all this? How in the world do you ever sleep?" "Baba, it's fine, thank you." Then she realized something was up and laughed, which she always did. Margaret was very sweet natured, Mare added. She wouldn't get upset over things. How calmly she took things amazed us. At the time of the D-Day invasion of Normandy, Baba worked with Margaret and Geisha, the cat at Marizod. Now, at the beginning of August, as the war was drawing to a close, Baba again chose Margaret for a particular duty, this time involving a typhoon. Margaret recounted the story. We didn't know what was going on in the war since we weren't allowed to see the papers that week. Baba said he was beginning a week's fast and Mara could participate and fast for one day. At midday, the hottest time of day, he sent for me. He was alone. I was surprised, as he never alone. He said, "Fetch a book and read to me." I went off and got an Agatha Christie book with short stories in it, thinking that the stories would be better since we could probably get through only one. He told me where to sit in the room. It was so hot. I can't tell you what the temperature was. It was a terrible place. He got into his bed and covered himself with a sheet, like a corpse, signaling me to read. So I sat there in the heat reading an Agatha Christie until my head began to go round and round. The story Margaret chose was The Blue Geranium, about a murderous nurse who poisoned her superstitious patient with smelling salts, while the patient is led to believe that she is under a curse. I'm not a person who faints, but I thought, well, I'm going to faint soon. But I went on. No sign from this corpse under the sheet. All of a sudden, up he jumped, sheet and everything. He told me to go away. He did this 3 times during that week. The girls got off for their afternoon nap. Not a soul was about the place. Margaret's story continued, however, with another of her duties, taking Typhoon for a walk. I I was very thankful to Typhoon because I was allowed to take the dog for walks. That meant I was a human being walking outside every day. One day, I went out and saw a house where people gathered. It was covered with flags and streamers. I wondered what was going on. It was a lieutenant colonel's house. The war was over, and Baba hadn't told us. It was the same week I had done the reading. On 6 August, United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. From 7 August, besides being read to by Margaret, Baba was out in the streets doing must work for 3 days. And on 9 August, another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Not long afterwards, Typhoon died of internal injuries sustained previously in a fall from up the upstairs terrace. Ali Shah was brought to Hyderabad again on 21 August for 3 days, and on 2 September, the Japanese formally surrendered the following day. Narayan Maharaj unexpectedly dropped his body in Bangalore. Picture in Upper Meherabad, 1936-37, taken by Mani, MSI collection. Next page is a picture in Panchgani in 1938. Mani, courtesy. Is that Ranu? Who's with the Baba?
I'm guessing Mara. Let's see what the
Yeah, sure.
things.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it's Mara.
Mhm.
Yeah, good guess. Just to digress for a moment, two things. One, I think it's hilarious that Mara uh, thinks of herself as lazy a bit, and that's why she and Margaret get along so well. A Margaret story was she was visiting Los Angeles and Meher Mount one time with Agnes Barron there, gave Agnes tickets to see a dance. And so Agnes came into town and went to this program. And as Agnes was leaving, Margaret came out to see Agnes, to the elevator. And Agnes got in the elevator. And as the doors were closing, Margaret said to Agnes, being with Meher Baba is hell. And then brief pause, but it's worth it, my dear. And the elevator was closed, and Agnes went back to Marymount.
Should I take a turn now? Chapter 74, Demobilization. The 6-month lease on the Jubilee Hills house in Hyderabad was up, so Meher Baba decided to move back to Maharashtra, this time to a Nawab's, that's a prince's, bungalow in Pasarni, 2 miles from Wai, on the road to Panchgani. Baba and the group left on 6 September 1945, arriving in Pune the next day, where Baba and the women stayed at Bindra House. On 8 September, they left for Wai. When their car went through a long tunnel along the way, the women stuck their heads out the windows and called Baba's name to hear the echo. At first, the women staying in Pasarni were Mera, Mani, Meru, Naja, Kitty, Rano, Margaret, and Walu, along with the two maidservants, Rakma and Lakshi. The other women from Mehrabad joined them a few weeks later. Some of the Mandali also stayed in Pasarni, in rooms outside the compound, which was surrounded by a 10-foot high, fortress like wall. The bungalow itself was quite large, but even though it belonged to a Nawab, it was not very fancy. Because of the high wall, the women could not see out. Huge, shady mango trees surrounded the house. They tied a swing in one of the trees, and although Baba was too busy to swing in it, Mera and Mani did. When they first arrived, Mera chose a room with picturesque windows. Above a large cupboard was an ornate portrait of a Maharaja that dominated the room. The picture bothered her. She did not wish to see the man's face first thing in the morning, so she asked Baba if it was all right to move it. And all the women, including the two servants, helped carry it to the library, which was some distance from their room. They joked about how heavy the Nawab was. The Mandali hung the portrait in the library, and it seemed just right there. For the next 3 months, Baba traveled back and forth between Wai and Mehrabad, and to Raipur, Calcutta, Cuttack, Nagpur, and Bhopal for must contacts, meetings, poor feedings, and intensive seclusion work on top of a mountain. Mera recalled the Nawab's bungalow as quiet and having a lovely atmosphere. We shared large rooms. There was much cooking to be done and vegetables to be cleaned because all the Mehrabad women were there. Baba told us we could use the library in the house. There was a lovely veranda in front of our room. In the afternoons, we stitched, sewed, or read there. Most of the time, Baba was out for must work. A few times, Mara and Margaret read poems in the library or the garden. Some that Mara thought particularly beautiful, Margaret encouraged her to memorize. Mara tried to learn a few lines, but never recited them for Baba. Though I sang a song or two for Baba, she said, I don't remember ever reciting poems to him. The forested area near Wai is cool and pleasant. We were permitted out for daily walks, but not alone. Either three in a group, but usually four. We were never to be less than three together, Baba instructed. Often one group met up with another group. One reason may have been that there were tigers in the area, which was like a valley. When Baba was away, we went for walks in the mornings and evenings also. When Mera and the others went for a walk, they walked too fast and too far for Meru, Gulu, and Jalu Dastur. Since the portly sisters could not keep up, the Dastur girls usually stayed back. During their walks, the others sometimes collected cow dung to fertilize the garden. Ah, good for them. Kitty once bent over to collect some, but the others shouted, "Hold it, Kitty! That's not buffalo, it's human." So what's wrong with that? Pilami was the watchwoman at the gate to the women's compound, where she took turns with Masi and sometimes Kaku. After eating breakfast and having her bath, Pilamai was to be on duty by 7 a.m. Hot water was kept ready for her bath, but once Banubai, who was mentally challenged, slipped in and took a bath first. Pilamai was enraged. And the sidebar says, despite being much older than them, Banubai would address Mera and Mani as Mera and Mani Auntie, or Auntie, which all found amusing.
I don't have that sidebar in mine. Interesting.
Mm. Baba came along just as Pilamai was railing at Banubai, but he did not say anything and walked by. The next moment, Pilamai was embracing Banubai. Baba came back and commented, "I can't believe my eyes. When I went by a second ago, you were practically thrashing her." Then he added, "I love you for your quality of forgiveness." He called everyone and said, "Get angry, but do it like Pila. One moment angry and the next forgetting everything." Pilamai was very straight. Oh, sorry. Here it says Pilamasi, but it must mean Pilamai. Was very straightforward, unless they're both equal, Pilamai and Pilamasi. Mansari elaborated. She had the quality of being furious one moment and the next moment feeling regretful, embracing and asking forgiveness. Baba loved her very much. Margaret had a similar quality. She would say things in a straightforward, cutting way. In the ashram, I liked Pila and Margaret best. Mehera observed, Pilamai was so talkative, but a very fine person. Her husband was so calm and quiet. Whatever Pila said, he would agree with her. She had no money, but she had a very big heart and was always generous. On 18 September, Baba left for Meherabad, where, among other things, he inspected the construction work underway at Pimplegaon. Kalamama, one of the Mandali, was enlarging the small cottage on the property and building a few storerooms for the women, who needed more space. Baba returned to Pasarni, but soon left again for an intense seclusion atop Angiras Rishi Mountain near Raipur. Both Baba and the men and women Mandali returned to Meherabad on September 15 December. 10 days later, Mera's 38th birthday was celebrated on a grand scale, with many out-of-town guests arriving for a 3-day celebration. The sidebar says, as it happened, the perfect film for Mehera was showing at Sarosh Cinema. National Velvet, the story of a young girl and her horse. Was that Elizabeth Taylor?
I think so.
Cool.
And interesting that that sidebar is not in this, but I'm noting National Velvet as a reference because it obviously perfect for merit. That's a
Mm,
wonderful uh,
mm,
quality, to say the least.
mm. Baba took all the women to see it in two buses at 6 a.m. I love their morning showings on 28th December. So, back to the text. While the women remained on the hill, the construction work at Merazad was not yet completed. Baba went into seclusion in January 1946 in what was later Kaikobad's cottage at Lower Mehrabad. He did not see the women for 1 month. He had intended to stay in the cottage longer, but bothered by the continual passing of the traffic on the Dond road, he decided to move to Pimplegown, which was much quieter. On 2 February, Baba called Kitty and Rano privately and told them, I am shortly sending Irene and Margaret to Europe for my work, keeping both of you here. The next day, Baba left for Merazad with Mera, Mani, Meru, Nadja, Margaret, and Walu, where Baba went into partial seclusion in the room that was occupied later by Pendu. Baba worked with musts, took walks with the women to Seclusion Hill or down the road to the reservoir, and went to an occasional film with them at Sarosh Cinema. Sidebar says those women at Mehrabad also went to the theater by bus. Margaret was unaware that she would be leaving for the West soon, but she remembered one particular outing when Baba was a bit rough with her. Baba once went out of his way to hurt me. I think this is Margaret talking.
Yeah.
We were going into Ahmednagar. I was reduced to the lowest rank possible. I didn't go in Baba's car with the girls. I went with the Matrani, the toilet cleaner. Where's Margaret and the Matrani? Baba asked. I had on my best dress. I wouldn't reply. I was sulking. Why, when you go out with me, don't you wear a nice dress? Baba asked just before we got in the car. I wouldn't answer. He knew I had no clothes. He looked at me. I was really taken aback. Then Mani whispered to him that I had no other clothes. Well, Mani shall make you a dress. I didn't say thank you. I was too annoyed. But she did make me something. The piano for Mehrabad had been brought and kept in the small cottage at Merazad on the carpet in one corner of the sitting room, adjoining the room Baba had first used. Baba said that Kitty could come every week, sometimes twice a week, to give Mera piano lessons. A car was specially sent to Mehrabad to bring Kitty. One of the songs Mera learned to play was Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes. But a few months later, when they left Meherazade, the lessons ended. Sidebar says, in 1947, when Norina and Elizabeth stayed at Meherazade and more room was needed, the piano was sent back to Meherabad. Mera agreed to it because she was not enthusiastic about learning to play the piano. It was too complicated for Kitty to come and teach me, she said, and I had other work to do. Before they left on the new life, Baba gave the piano to Sarosha's wife, Vilu. From 9 February, Baba left Meherazade every night to sleep in a small farm cottage half a mile away, called simply Giara's cottage because it was on Mr. Giara's land. Sidebar says Giara's cottage was later converted into a storeroom. Oh, Bing, uh, could you take another turn, please?
Sure. On the 15th, Baba's birthday, according to the Zoroastrian calendar, Baba took the women walking to Happy Valley. It was the first and only time Baba had walked the entire way from Meherazade to Happy Valley. They started early in the morning when it was cool and chatted with Baba along the way. Mara recalled Baba was wearing a sadra and pajamas. For their lunch, they had a special non-vegetarian treat, mutton pulao brought from Ahmednagar by Adi Sr. Afterwards, they returned by car as by now it was too warm to walk, especially after the heavy meal. Near the end of March, Baba announced that Margaret would be returning to England in May, from where he wished her to go to America. Margaret was surprised, as it was difficult to travel from England to the States then, with all the troops still being demobilized. Baba laughed, stating, "You must go. I have made you my link in America." Margaret did indeed go to America and got a job touring with the American Ballet Theater, which took her all across the country. Irene was sent back to Switzerland almost immediately. Irene had never said that she missed Switzerland or that she wanted to go back, whereas Margaret did once mention that she missed the English climate and the change of seasons, the autumn colors, and winter. Before leaving, Irene asked Baba if he had any orders for her. "What do you need orders for?" he replied. "You have stayed with me for 8 years. If you do not know by now what to do to please me, it was all for nothing. You can get married, you can eat meat, you can drink wine, but remember, you've been 8 years with me," observed Irene. This was much harder than if he had issued some rules instead. Around 26 March, Irene was sent to Bombay with Don for the day to arrange her boat passage home. Usually during the tours, when traveling in India by train, Irene was ill and traveled first class with someone, while others in the ashram went second and third class. Don was a major in the army, so he always sat in a first class military compartment. For this trip, he listed himself as Major Duncan and his wife, so that Irene could travel with him. But Don warned Irene not to mention this in the ashram when they returned. After her boat tickets were purchased, they went to see a movie. Back at Meherabad, Baba asked what they had done in Bombay. He kept probing for more details until Irene finally admitted they had gone to a movie. Baba scolded her. "As soon as you're on the loose, you take advantage. You shouldn't have gone to the cinema without my permission, when you know that others here don't get to go. You shouldn't have taken liberties, which others don't have." Later, Irene noted, "After being so strict in the ashram, one felt happy to be a bit free to walk around, to do as one liked. It was natural, but afterwards we felt so bad." 3 weeks later, When it came time for Irene to leave, Baba told her not to contact any of his disciples in Bombay, but to stay by herself in a hotel until her boat left. On 14 April, Nadine Tolstoy died in New York at the age of 62 from Lou Gehrig's disease. Baba called Narina, "Tell Elizabeth Nadia lives in me, with me, and for me more than ever before." Side note, Irene had a lot of contact and conflicts with Nadine, and it is curious that Irene was leaving India when Nadine was leaving her body. 2 days later, Baba left Marazad with Mehera, Mani, and Meru for a secret destination where he could go into seclusion. The location turned out to be a bungalow outside Dehradun in Naranjanpur, that had been rented for him by Papa Jaswala. Kitty, Rano, and Margaret did not even know they were going when they were sent ahead with Don. In Delhi, they were to wait for Baba and proceed with him to the place of seclusion. On the train, Dodd passed the women off to his relatives so that they could occupy a military compartment with him. Dodd passed the women off as his relatives so they could occupy a military compartment with him, as Irene had. The women were wearing their solar toupees, but before entering an army rest house along the way, Don said to them, "For God's sakes, take off the toupees before we go inside. You look like a bunch of missionaries." In Delhi, after a brief respite at a British club, they met Baba at the train station and went with him to Dehradun. Naja, Katie, Khorshid, and Sunamasai had rendezvous with Baba and his group at Manmad and traveled with them on the train. Mansari, Kaikubad's family, and Baidu's family were left on Meherabad Hill along with Walu, who had a bad case of malaria. And there's a photo. Repassed during the Blue Bus Tour journey. 1938-39. Margaret, perhaps, behind the tree, Kitty in front of the tree, Mara bending over behind Baba, Ranu on the right. Let's see. Next page is a picture of Mayor Baba on Champa, the donkey, on Meherabad Hill in 1936. 75. Garden of Roses. Mayor Baba and the group stayed in Naranjanpur for 7.5 months, from mid-April until December 1946. Although Baba was mostly away on extensive must tours in the area, sometimes for weeks at a time. Within a week of their arrival, Baba took the women to Hardwar to witness annual gathering of sadhus once again. They stayed in 2 rooms of a hotel on the banks of the Ganges for one night before returning to Naranjanpur. Wild monkeys were indigenous to the area, and most of the houses in Hardwar had bars on the windows to prevent them from entering. When a few monkeys tried to come into their room to steal food, Meru threw her sandal at the leader. He snarled, picked it up, and ran off with it. But Kitty retrieved it from the street below. As mentioned, Baba was with the Mandalay most of the time in Hardwar. The women's inexpensive hotel did not provide boiled or filtered water, and Baba told the women not to drink the water there. After the drinking bottles of water they had brought, After drinking the bottles of water they had brought, by evening they were feeling thirsty, especially after a spicy meal. Naja suggested gargling the water, but not drinking it, and going to bed. Nobody thought this a good idea. Suppose one water goes down our throats, Mara asked. All were relieved when Baba came and suggested cold lemon drinks or plain sodas. Naja was first in line for the drinks. Sidebar. Besides bottles of water for themselves, a brass can of drinking water for Baba was always taken whenever they traveled. On 1 May, Baba personally took Margaret to Delhi, from where she would travel to Bombay to book passage for England. After 7 years in India with the master, Margaret was returning home. At the Delhi train station, Baba told her, "Take my love to the West." After dropping off Margaret at the Delhi train station, Baba, along with Kakabaria, who had accompanied him, went looking for Mus, and he did not return to the house in Naranjapur until 20 May. It was a good house outside of town, Mara recalled. There were thousands of fireflies there. The house had large grounds with rose bushes on both sides. We put the roses on the mantel and elsewhere, but we soon ran out of places to put them. There was a guava orchard also. One unnamed must, brought to the house in a tonga, exclaimed at the gate, "I have come to the garden of roses." Upon seeing Baba, he declared, "Look at this man's face and forehead. They shine as if the sun were there. Can't you recognize who he is?" Sidebar. The fruit was ripe, the guavas, but it also attracted parrots in the daytime and bats at night.
Thank you, Bing. I just noticed Rolf is here. Do you want to read, Rolf? You're muted. Unmute yourself, Rolf. There you go.
Yes, the last thing I heard was about bats.
Yeah, that's the sidebar at the bottom of the page there. So,
Last line on the page is where we start.
In the daytime and bats at night. Did we finish the page? No?
No, not the last line, the before leaving.
So one and that, yes, the must, yes. Before leaving, the must insisted, can you hear me okay?
we hear you good.
Before leaving, the must insisted on writing down Baba's address, which is being kept secret from all those without a need to know and referred to only as the place of seclusion. After contacting him, Baba remarked that the must was on the fifth plane. Baba had a room on the ground floor. Mara continued, our bedrooms were upstairs. Kitty had a bedroom to herself. We called the place Pippi's Bungalow because of Pippi's Bungalow because of the servant's wife who looked after her baby near the well. Her other two children, the eldest being 7 or 8, played on the parapet. Nadja named the woman Pippi because she had a very high, squeaky voice and talked through her nose. Now, who was this woman, Pippi? We called the place Pippi's Bungalow. Okay. Though the woman and her husband had 3 children, they had never officially been married. Baba told them that they must get married legally. So they did and came to our bungalow afterwards. The cooking was done in shifts of 7 days each. Naja cooked for 7 days, then Katie, then Korshad, and later Vishnu's cousin Indu, who had been called from Pune. Kitty managed the grocery shopping and other household duties.
If I may just, I actually need to leave, attend to
Oh,
something.
oh,
And,
no problem, Big. Thanks for
and
coming.
I just want to say that I'm leaving for Meherabad on Sunday, and I expect the following Thursday to start. I'll be there for 5 weeks, and Meherazad's open 3 days a week. And part of what I'm looking forward to is reading this book on Mara's porch while I'm over there. But
Oh,
anyway,
great. We look forward
In
to
India now, is
joining
that
you.
right, Bean?
won't be attending these meetings, but I'll be reading the book.
Oh, I see.
And you're in India now, is that right?
I'm leaving on Sunday, the
Hey, you
19th.
guys, can I remind you this is being recorded?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let it go from there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Could you continue, please, Ralph?
Kitty managed the grocery shopping and other household duties. During their long stay in Niranjanpur, Baba took the women to see several films in Dehradun, including two Ingrid Bergman movies, Gaslight with Charles Boyer and Saratoga Trump with Gary Cooper. There were other side trips as well. On the 29th May, Baba took Mara, Mani, Meru, and Rano to Kulu Valley at the foothills of the Himalayas in Himachal Pradesh, where it was cooler. Mani remembered the bus trip there. It was a privately hired bus. Duncan was with us, arranging everything for the trip. There were four of us women, and Kaka and Baidul also. A sheet was put in the bus between the men and women. We could not see them, but we could hear them. Baba was in the back with us. Don was lying down in front, since it was a long journey. When we came to a British post where we had to show the permit or license to go on, Kaka shouted, Duncan, don't, Duncan. Don sat up, so the Indian official could see the British face and wave us on. Then Don would lie down again. Their first stop was Pathankot, where Baba contacted Pathankot, Pathankot, and here Baba contacted the charge man of the city. It was so intensely hot that at their rest house, Baba told the women to bring a few chairs and sit outside. They stopped again at Mandi, where Baba told Rano, who had not been feeling well, to eat a place of rice and curry. Rano felt nauseated, and the last thing she wanted was to eat. But Baba told her to, and she obeyed, though later she was not able to keep the food down. They reached Raison, Raison, on the 3rd June and had lunch at a dak bungalow. After lunch, they made the ascent on foot or by pony to a cottage at Catrane, where they were to spend the next 3 weeks, where they were to spend the next 3 weeks. Kulu, known as the Valley of the Gods, is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the country, surrounded by pine-covered hills and lush meadows. Kulu, said Mani, was one of the most beautiful places we have been with Baba. Mara agreed.
Oh, before you go on, could you read this sidebar here?
Gaslight, comma, according to one film guide, is an exciting melodrama about a man trying to drive his wife to insanity. Saratoga Trump was not as good. Elaborate but miscast, overlong version of Edna Ferber's novel of New Orleans vixen, Bergman, and Cowboy Cooper.
Ooh,
Novel of New Orleans vixen.
I got to check that one out. So, bottom sentence there, going on. Mara agreed.
Mara agreed it was very beautiful. Mara agreed that it was very beautiful that time of year. We stayed in a pretty cottage. There were pear trees, but we didn't get any to eat, as they were still green. We had good servants there, all wanted work. A 12-year-old boy worked very quickly and finished what was given him. We wanted to bring back to Nagar, but Baba said that he was used to the cold climate and his family was there, so he wouldn't agree. The toilet sweeper was elderly, a very good servant. She would go into the forest and bring wood, which was put into the boiler on the back veranda for our bath water. About 10 days before we were to leave, Baba came and asked if we wanted another servant, who he said looked nice. We told him we had enough already. We said no at first, but then we agreed, as Baba himself had come to our room to ask. It seemed perhaps he wanted her to work there. When Baba came again, he said it was okay, and we kept her. But she was plump and not hard working. She sat down in front of Monty, took out a cigarette, and started smoking. We didn't like her, but we had to put up with her. One morning, we were going for a walk. I carried 2 scarves for Baba to wrap his head in the cool forest. A peacock green one and a warm silkish one, which Mary Beckett had woven herself. I had kept it with me. I had kept it with so much care, as it was given with love to Baba. In some confusion, I put the scarves down somewhere. The 2 scarves disappeared. I felt very sorry, as we never saw those scarves again. Baba sent Donkin or someone to look for them along the paths. As I thought I had them in my hand when we left, I might have dropped them. They were never found. We then felt that the lazy woman servant had taken them. Every morning, Baba took us for walks. In the evening, too. We weren't cooking then. Kaka was. Monty read to Baba. We ate together. 3 servants were enough for us. After they finished our work, they went and helped Kaka in the kitchen. There was a nice dining table and cut glass. Good furniture for the Europeans. Duncan had brought expensive jams, honey, and cheese, these to keep in the sliding glass cupboard. Baba had told him to arrange things for us, and he brought lovely things from the valley. He had a well-stocked We had a well-stocked larder. Our mouths watered when we saw it all. Since the cottage was located on the side of a mountain, provisions had to be brought up by horseback. Vegetables were in short supply in the mountains, but there was plenty of meat, which they were allowed only occasionally. Kaka usually made liquid curries. Ronno got hepatitis during the trip. Mara continued. Got hepatitis during the trip. Mara continued and stayed in a room on top of the stables where she would be isolated. This was the reason that Ronno had been nauseated in Mandi. Duncan diagnosed and treated her, advising her to eat the many appetizing things that were available, but Baba did not agree. Baba, fed her with his own hands. I'm presuming he is Baba, remarking, I brought you here to look after my requirements, but now I have to look after yours. It is my bad luck, Ronno replied. Not bad luck, Baba corrected. It's your good luck. With Baba's treatment, Ronno improved quickly, but he told her later, if I had not ordered you to eat that plate of rice and curry, you would have been much worse. Ronno was not Baba's only patient. One day, when they were out for a walk, a local woman requested medicine from Baba. She was suffering from goiter and pointed to an enlarged growth on her neck. Baba told her to wait for them to return from their walk and then to follow them back to the cottage. Baba had water filled in a bottle with a certain amount of iodine drops added to it. He instructed Dawn about her treatment. She was told to drink some of the water every day and therefore to take iodine supplements. The people in that area were so poor. Mara related, we saw women gathering leaves in the forest. It was explained to us that they had to store fuel for the winter, as the winters were so severe. No year-round gainful livelihood was to be had on the mountains. One enterprising Gorwala horseman who earned money during the summer by hiring by what the horses for riding. Right. Baba agreed and told Don to discuss the terms. I'm going to start that paragraph again, if I may.
Absolutely.
One enterprising Gorwala horseman who earned money during the summer by hiring out ponies came to their cottage, asking if they wanted to hire some horses for riding. Baba agreed and told Duncan to discuss the terms. The horses were brought that evening, and Mara, Mani, and Meru had a ride through the mountains. Don and Baba started out before the women, walking in front, while the women followed on horseback at an easy pace. The first day, the horseman was told to bring the horses at 4:30 p.m., but he came an hour late. Baba was not pleased and told Don to scold him. Don began scolding the Gorwala, telling him to leave. The man removed his turban and laid it at Don's feet, begging forgiveness. But Don kept up his tirade as he thought this was what Baba wanted. But Baba, who was watching, tapped Don on the shoulder, asking him why he was so upset, and forgave the man. The horses were tame, short mountain ponies, strong and sturdy, and the women told Baba that he too should ride. To please Mara, Baba agreed and got on. The sun was still hot, and she wanted an umbrella. To prevent the horses from shying, someone handed Baba the umbrella from behind. Someone handed Baba the umbrella from behind, after he had mounted. Baba had a little ride. Baba had a little ride, Mara recalled. He looked very sweet in the saddle. We all had we all went through the pine forest down a broad dirt pathway. The horseman's son or nephew was 16 or 17, a fair-skinned, attractive lad. Baba liked him and told someone to bring the boy to his room. He wanted the boy to know and love him. Mara explained. He wanted the boy to know and love him, Mary explained. Once, when they were out for a ride, they saw Nicholas Roerich, a famous Russian painter, coming from the opposite direction. Roerich lived in Kulu with his wife and son, also an artist. Roerich, an elderly man with a long beard, looked up at Baba on the horse and tipped his hat. Baba nodded back. Baba didn't mind the chance encounter, and Mani, because Roerich didn't know who Baba was, though Roerich was interested in spirituality. Mani
Maybe,
remembered
maybe read the sidebar since it has to do with Rorich.
Roerich family. The Roerich family had lived in Kulu for more than 20 years. Nadine Tolstoy knew Roerich and his wife. In April 1937, Nadine had written to Roerich a long letter telling him about Baba and urging him to come to Nasik and meet Baba, but the artist never came. Roerich died in 1948, just 2 years after his contact with Baba. Mani remembered another incident on their stay to Kulu when Baba did not want contact because the person had recognized him. We had gone for a long walk and saw a sadhu. Baba wanted to combine this relaxation with some work, but we, of course, never knew what it was or how he would do it. He contacted the different persons, and he wanted to contact this particular sadhu. As Baba was approaching, he led the man. He as Baba was approaching, he sent the man a message through me. Baba contacted him in private while we waited. The next day, when we were out for a walk, the sadhu was waiting. Somehow, The man had recognized Baba in an instant. His face shone like a switch had been put on. There was light in his face. I didn't mention Baba's name in the first contact, but Baba saw what had happened and no longer wished to contact him. He wanted to get away as his work was done. He turned right around and started walking so fast. We followed. It wasn't easy keeping up with him, as Baba was taking twists and turns to avoid the man. Every now and then he gestured. Is he following? Is he following? We were running, looking back. Baba was being chased by a devoted soul. We returned home breathless. The man wasn't able to follow us home. Later, we were told someone was making inquiries about Baba's whereabouts. I think that's how we're doing, Eugene.
Oh, we're good. You want me to take a turn?
Sure, yeah. How's our how's our time?
Just enough time for me to read a page or two.
Okay, okay.
On 20 June, Baba and the group left Katrain for the neighboring resort of Manali for a day's visit before continuing on to Raisan, where they spent the night. Palampur was reached the next day, where an amusing incident occurred. At the dock bungalow, a goat wandered into the bathroom and started chewing on Baba's soap. Soap bubbles came foaming out of the goat's mouth, and the women had a hearty laugh over it. From there, they took the train to Saharanpur and returned by bus to Niranjanpur, arriving on 22 June. On 2 July, Baba left for must work, contacted the great Majzub Chacha again in Ajmer, and visited other places before returning about 10 days later. Sometime in August, Baba took the women to Hardwar. They stayed in a bungalow that had a large garden with shady trees and a well. Baba had used this bungalow previously on his frequent trips to Haridwar. Baba continued his intensive must contacts at the end of July into August, and he and the men Mandalay were becoming increasingly tired and haggard. Baba even remarked, "This trip has been the most exhausting excursion I have ever undertaken." From 12 August, Baba and the men were in Rishikesh for 6 days. During this time, the escalating rivalry of the Hindu and Muslim communities, both agitating for independence from Britain, resulted in a bloody riot and massacre in Calcutta. What had begun at, as a revolution of Indians against the British was now becoming a civil war of Indian against Indian. Meanwhile, in Rishikesh, Kaka and Erich contacted a high yogi named Jal Tapasvi, who commented on the recent disturbances, pointing out that they were quite natural and indeed inevitable, and were the result of the work of the Avatar, who was now alive. He said that the great men of the world, although famous and often venerated by mankind, were mere playthings in the hands of the Avatar. They were like kites on strings, the ends of which were all in the grasp of the Avatar, who controlled them as he wished. When Jal Tapasvi was contacted later by Baba at a house in Rishikesh, he exclaimed, "The Avatar has come!" After returning to Niranjanpur, Baba went into strict seclusion for 2 weeks. On 10 September, for a change after his intensive work, he took Mera, Mani, Meru, and Kitty to Simla, where they stayed at the Royal Hotel. Erich, Pendu, Kaka, and Adi Sr. were also to assist in the must work, but stayed in separate quarters. Before the trip was announced, Baba took away Kitty's household management duties, which she had been doing for years, and gave them to Nadja. Kitty felt bad at the time, but later realized that it was Baba's plan to rearrange the ashram so that she would be free to go with him to Simla. Simla is one of the largest hill stations in the world, well known for its scenic walks and cool, pleasant climate. The location was discovered by accident in the early 18th century by a group of British Army officers who were amazed by its temperate climate and lush greenery. The British began transforming Simla into one of the best and most fashionable hill resorts in the country, building Georgian-style houses and villas, hotels, banks, clubs, and recreational facilities, including a golf course. The town grew steadily, becoming a famous retreat for British high society. Mehra loved Simla. During their 10-day stay, they went for walks, played games, and read in the afternoons. When asked by the author whether she had ever played cards with Baba, Mehra replied, "Only when we were in Simla in the afternoons. There was nothing to do. We played with Baba for a few days. A game called Seven Hands Trump, where you try to make 7 hands." Sidebar says, this game is also called coat piece. Mehra confided that she did not care much for cards. She was bored by it. She knew a few games, such as Patience, but did not really enjoy playing. In any game they did play, it was usually Baba and Mehra on one side and Mani on the opposite side, with Meru or someone else as a partner. "We were determined to win," said Mani, "to beat Baba, but Baba always won." During one afternoon card session in Simla, Baba and Mani were on one side and Mehra and Meru on the other. In this card game, the losers are said to have to wear a coat. And if you lose badly, then you wear a quote-unquote donkey coat. Oh, so that's probably what the sidebar is referring to, the sidebar being this game is also called coat piece. Baba chose which card would be trump. Despite this, he and Mani did not make even one hand, the worst that they could possibly do. Mehra and Meru made all 7 hands, and Mehra teased Baba, "You all bid trumps and didn't make even one hand." Baba gathered up the cards and said, "Let's play again." Still they lost. This was the only time Baba ever saw this was the only time Mani ever saw Baba lose. And she thought he did so purposely to let Mera win. She, in fact, accused him of this. You lost because you wanted Mera to win. Mera disagreed, and later, whenever Mani was feeling cold, Mera teased her by saying, "If you're feeling so cold, then put on that donkey coat of yours." Kitty asked whether she could meet the local British residents. Baba permitted it, as Mani wanted a Scottish terrier, and Kitty was trying to locate one. Kitty always liked to be busy and active, Mera observed. While in Simla, they went to films and once to a play at the Gaiety Theatre. There was a quaint little theatre where Baba took us, Mera said. It was the first time that I had seen British actors perform a play. On the stage, in one corner, was a pearl white porcelain vase which I admired. It glowed elegantly, and I was attracted to it. When they returned home, Mera remarked to Mani, "Didn't you like the white vase in the corner? It looked so lovely with flowers in it." "What?" Mani replied. "It was a lovely brass vase or vase." "What do you mean brass?" Mera countered. "It was a beautiful white vase." "I'm sorry, Mera, but it was brass." "You can be sorry all you want, but I know it was white." "Well, I'm absolutely certain it was brass," Mera says. "I'm positive it was white." In exasperation, Mani finally said, "If you want me to say yes, I can say yes, but it was brass. You can tell me all night it was white, but I know for a fact it was brass." Mera insisted, "You can tell me all night and all day, but I'm sure it was white." They asked Kitty, who said, "I was too engrossed in watching the play. I didn't notice it." But she volunteered to solve the mystery. The next morning, Kitty went to the theater to inquire whether the vase had been white or brass. The stage manager told her that in certain scenes there had been a white vase, while in other scenes a brass one. "We couldn't decide whether to put the brass one or the white one," he explained. "So we used both." Back home, Kitty observed, "Well, for once, two people can be right." And there was a sidebar that went with the Gaiety Theater, um, the films they went to see. Oh, while in Simla, they went to films. And one of the films they saw at the Rivoli Theater was the Bob Hope Bing Crosby comedy, Road to Utopia. Here's a picture of Mara Baba and that's a Scottish Terrier in Florence Hall, Mahabaleshwar, in 1946 or 47. Baba holding Cracker, the Scottish Terrier. Cute.
Eugene,
Perfect place to stop here at the um, beginning of chapter 76 at the top of
read,
315.
if you want to read on, I have to break away.
No,
Mayor,
that's
Mayor,
fine. Thank you. No, Mayor didn't want to read, or he's busy with work.
I see. I didn't
Yeah.
know he was here. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you though. You didn't know that, but he said so at before you got here, I
Oh,
guess.
wow. I didn't, I only saw you and Being when I came, but it's all right. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah.